Hello, and welcome to broadcasts from Fiddler's Green. I realize I don't have my photo up here. Oh, well, that's ugly. Okay, well, welcome to the podcast for tonight. This is pretty impromptu. I've been really massively tired for the last few days, just dealing with various things. And I wanted to do, obviously, a podcast on Ash Wednesday and on the culture war going forward. But I really didn't know what to talk about. I think most people are kind of saturated on podcasts, and the next few episodes of this, I intend to sort of organize them around guests or around user-suggested topics. I also want to see if I can kind of get the length down to a reasonable length as well. I mean, 3 hours is pretty long. So maybe this would be more of a question and answer session. Maybe it'll just be more of an extemporaneous reflection on various things I'm thinking about. One thing that kind of caught me off guard a little bit this week is I had this weird kind of apocalyptic dream about artificial intelligence sometime late this week, especially around the whole Bing thing. I read a bunch of these terrifying articles about general AI, which most of them are completely overblown. It relies on the confusion of a lot of things and a lot of these seamless machine learning algorithms that are very, very good at language processing at this moment. I mean, this is nowhere near the kind of apocalyptic artificial intelligence that a lot of these doomsayers are talking about, like Rocco and the bunch like that. But still, nevertheless, I was just struck with this. And I don't know. Periodically, I get these spells of paranoia where I'm immediately thinking like everything around me might be fake. Everything around me that I see on the internet could be fake. It could be manufactured, and we could all be in sort of the penultimate days of some apocalyptic confrontation with superintelligence. I probably think way too much about this stuff, and for a while this is really eating at me. And it's not so much the fear of death. It's the fear of artificiality. It's the fear of being stuck in a world that's completely fake from top to bottom and that has no substance to it. And also the fear that this is going to capture all meaningful things that could possibly go forward. I worry a lot about my son being stuck in a world that is made out of complete simulacrum. What was that? Who's that? It was a Baudrillard who did Simulacra and Simulacrum. Actually, I'm going to look this up. Sorry, guys. This is going to be a really weird... it's by Jean Baudrillard. Yeah, of course. So this is a French author who wrote this novel about things being sort of hypothetically fake, that everything can be imitated, and what can we really know about the world? This, of course, is sort of the demon that Descartes imagines, hundreds of years before Baudrillard. There could be a demon sitting in front of you and the rest of the world that completely feeds you fake information about the world. And everything that you're interacting with is completely artificial, is completely disrupted by deception and by things that are being fed to you for completely nefarious purposes. And, obviously for Descartes, this was a very hypothetical theological proposition from which he used as a springboard for his famous cogito ergo sum statement, the idea that you can derive human existence and value from the fact that you are a conscious observer of the world. But, Baudrillard kind of has a more menacing take on it, I believe. He was very influential on the movie The Matrix. I'm going to discuss that in a minute. Not that we haven't discussed The Matrix enough. But the Baudrillard's view of artificiality is that it's just completely hegemonic. That once you can experience something as being sort of fake and superficial and indistinguishable from the real thing, then your experience of the real thing can never be the same again. Because you can never really interact with it and not think, is this fake? Is this fake? Is this completely meaningless? Is this some kind of, to borrow a term, is this a matrix that I'm stuck in? Is this a prison of my own mind? Because once you've had the experience of really being faked out and deceived in a huge way, then that calls into question all of your other experiences. With this artificial intelligence stuff, the real fear is not so much that I'm going to encounter HAL 9000 or some kind of basilisk that's going to destroy the world. Maybe that will be the fear eventually, although I just think there's sort of limitations to that I haven't even seen begin to be overcome by modern technology. The fear that we have right now is that humans are just going to be completely submerged into simulation. To the point where every time you read a paper, you have to wonder, is this simulated? Who wrote this paper? Did the writer use artificial intelligence? Did the writer write a paper and then put it through artificial intelligence to make it better? Like, where does this idea actually come from? Are nefarious ideas being inserted into it by some other source, by the government, by someone who's trying to do me harm? And so everything kind of progresses through this path where you can't really be accountable for contact with the real world, where you're constantly questioning everything that you see. And because of that, the only thing you fall back on is kind of mere indulgence. The way Descartes handles it, I keep on wanting to say the way Cartesian handles it, like, the Cartesian coordinates. The way Descartes handles it, he expects the encounter with this demon of ultimate falsehood to be sort of a impetus for a moment of reflection where you kind of break through to a greater divinity. Oh man, but I don't know. I mean, this is sort of the thing when we're confronted with ultimate artificiality. Why wouldn't we just descend into ultimate triviality? What would cause us to kind of want to be heroic and try to be meditative and contemplative about this reality when everything is fake? Are we do we just become perverted gods amongst ourselves, and with zero power, solely being drained of our humanity? And this is troubling me for days and days and days, especially just how do I keep my child or my children away from this eventually. And it got me thinking a little bit more about the Matrix. Now, of course, Baudrillard was a huge influence on the Matrix. I gotta check this to make sure my sound is all right. I don't think, make sure I'm not hitting F in the chat here. But obviously the Baudrillard was a very influential in the Matrix, and he famously said that the Matrix was the kind of movie that the real Matrix would make about itself. And, true enough, The Matrix, it's always a hard movie because it's kind of bad. And the problem is it's easy to see what's bad about the Matrix and what's good about it. What's bad about the Matrix is all of the kind of things that are hallmarks of the Wachowski siblings, brothers, sisters, who knows, and all the hallmarks of the Wachowskis' other movies, like the brutal references to anime, the corny fight scenes that don't go anywhere, just the extemporaneous insertion of spectacle for no reason, and kind of this plot line that proceeds in a very predictable manner. And that's all really, really bad about The Matrix, the movie. But I maintain that the first 40 minutes of The Matrix is just an utter masterpiece, because it hits on all of these things about the modern world and gives us means to understand them. And it certainly is. Certainly, when you go to the next half of The Matrix, it's kind of utter trash. It literally becomes the movie that the real Matrix would make about itself. Like, you're in the Matrix, but you can get out of the Matrix by getting really, really, really good at playing the Matrix. But there's a few lines I always remember from The Matrix, and the first one. Well, obviously there's ones that everyone remembers, right? There's ones that everyone remembers, and the ones that everyone remembers aren't very important, or I'm not going to go into here. But the ones that I think kind of get left by the wayside are when Morpheus is being interrogated by the agents, and they talk to him about how the Matrix is designed to look like basically the 1990s. And the agent says that this was the height of your civilization, because after this point in time, human beings kind of gave in to artificiality. They gave in to basically letting the machines do their creativity for them. And that's always struck with. It's funny, no one ever talks about that line, but that line has haunted me to this day, because ever since I saw The Matrix in the theater, I felt very definitively that culture basically just stopped. Now, to be clear, culture didn't just stop, right? It tapered off to the point where the amount of culture that's in circulation that's really invigorating and human and meaningful these days is a very, very slow ebb compared to where it was in the 90s. The early 90s in particular, but the late 90s when The Matrix was created as well. Certainly everyone can see this, right? Everyone can see this when they look at things like movies, for instance, right? I mean, when was the last time people have seen a good movie? All the movies are now praised not for being good, but for not being horrifically bad. For not just being if a movie is not soul-drainingly bad, it is an excellent movie. It could be a paint-by-numbers period piece with no original concepts in it. People will praise it up to the high heavens. You've got to see it. It could be just, a reasonably good-looking science fiction film with no plot and no character development, like Dune. Oh my God, it's the second coming of Star Wars, or it's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Films are crap these days, and everyone knows it. No, there's almost no argument about it. Music, rock and roll is dead. We could argue about what killed it. Possibly the internet. Possibly the internet's killing off subcultures, killed off the idea of rock and roll. Also possibly the fact that the baby boomers grew into being the establishment. And in many ways, rock and roll was the art form of the silent generation and the baby boomers. And once they became the establishment, even the idea that the alternative musicians had of sort of doing the 60s over again became kind of futile. So I mean, like, culture is in this impasse, and like, obviously I talk all the time about, like, every time I see a piece of culture I really enjoy that I think is original, like the Three Body Problem or Over the Garden Wall, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like, I make a big deal about it. But the amount of new things I see is like at a very, very low level. There aren't a lot of things that are new and astounding and that also feel human and life-giving and have a lot of vitality to them. And this more than anything else depresses me, because the sense of wonder that I'm kind of used to, well, I kind of hoped would be the inheritance of future generations, feels kind of like it's been tamped down and not necessarily extinguished, but kind of throttled to a certain degree. I'm always remembered of the obvious successor to The Matrix, which was the paradoxically even more depressing movie/book, Ready Player One. Now, I as Boulard said, if The Matrix was the movie The Matrix made about itself, then Ready Player One would be the hardcore pornography The Matrix made about itself, because the Ready Player One is like a love letter to the Matrix by the people who are trapped in the Matrix. It features people who are in a completely economically depressed world, who spend all their time playing video games in this hyper simulation. And sort of the MacGuffin that keeps them playing is this race to become the master of this video game universe. But unlike in the Matrix, there isn't even any understanding that this is going to fix the wretched state of their own world. It just, I mean, I guess it's sort of alluded that it will, but there's never really any mechanism for which this video game actually translates into improving this wretched, densely populated urban wasteland into something that's livable. It just seems like by winning this competition, the players of this game will get to play in the game forever. That's always sort of the difference between, people always struggle with the difference between pornography and art that just has a neurotic dimension to it. But I've always ventured that pornography has to sell you in a certain kind of illusion, and that once that illusion is punctured, then it immediately becomes disgusting or grotesque, or just outright insulting. And the pornographic impulse that's always sort of in play, either in male or female pornography, is this illusion of sort of this infinitely available high value partner that you're sort of, you never could get or couldn't be achieved in that way, or would have strings attached. And in order to be able to enjoy the pornography, you basically have to accept a lie. You have to swallow the lie whole. And there's a lot of things to be said about erotic pornography being damaging, but what I always felt was sort of damaging most in the spiritual sense about pornography is that you have to swallow the lie in order to consume the product. And this is my whole crackpot theory about pornography being kind of disgusting in that way. And that was always the problem with Ready Player One. It was this sort of pornographic take. You had to accept the lie that playing video games was a good end in itself. That the whole purpose of this existence was to escape from it into sort of a self-reflective world of indulgence. And someone here said the three-body problem is sci-fi Chat GPT would write. Well, certainly stylistically, maybe, right? The characters don't have any dimension to them. But the hypotheticals are interesting and fun. And currently Chat GPT is not ready to write something like that. So I think I'll give the author of the three-body problem a little bit of a break there. But certainly in terms of characters, three-body problem, the characters feel like they're basically auto-generated. And I don't think that was really the point of the book anyway. But I'm digressing. I shouldn't read the comments when I'm doing this stream. At any rate, the problem with artificiality, and I'm kind of getting to my thesis of Ash Wednesday and Lent here, is that really this is the problem humans have all around us at all time, is that we're kind of expected to absorb self-comforting artificiality over the real things that are around us. And this kind of brings me to my second part, the second quote that I really love from The Matrix and that stuck with me when I watched it in 1999 onwards. It's something that no one ever quotes. It's not even really very clear that this line is said in the movie, but nevertheless, I always remembered it, and that's when the Morpheus takes Neo into sort of a simulation of the Matrix, very, very much evocative of something like Dante's Inferno. And as they descend down into the horrific nature of the real world as it exists presently, Morpheus tells Neo, "Welcome to the desert of the real." And that always struck me as being kind of profound. And I always believed The Matrix could have been a better movie if they just ditched the entire last half of the movie, and all it would be Neo escaping the Matrix, and then him talking to Morpheus in this nightmare world, and it would be a dialogue between him and Morpheus about why he should accept living in the nightmare world rather than going back to the Matrix. That would have been a masterpiece, and there would have even been an element of Dante's Divine Comedy in the whole endeavor. And I always thought that would make a better movie. But Welcome to the Desert of the Real kind of struck me. I'm sure that the Wachowskis didn't have any spiritual significance to this. They just thought that sounded like a cool, cryptic thing for Morpheus to say when he was inviting Neo down into like the bowels of hell to examine the real world. But especially in light of Lent, and we think about the 40 days in the desert, or the 40 years that the Hebrew Israelites spent wandering, in the desert. That's kind of, in many ways, what we're being invited to do in Lent. And it's kind of to get back down to basic levels, right? The problem is that so much of the pleasure we take from this world, it's enjoyed as a lie. And I don't want to sound Buddhist when I say this, but it's enjoyed as kind of a lie, right? Every pleasure that man takes, from drink to food to sex to entertainment, has this implicit suggestion that the pleasure in the moment will last forever and be eternal. And the problem is that every single examination of our spiritual lives or our futures or what our mission is has to be overcome through this constant barrage of lies that we experience through these tiny little moments of pleasure, and that our brain tells us are windows into eternity, when they're really just sort of the undulations of the material world, and maybe even temptations of a demonic nature. The desert has to be attempted by Jesus in order to come in contact with something that's actually real, with a spiritual force that's trying to speak to him outside of the material pleasures, outside the material distractions. And that's sort of, I said this I'm speaking to you guys on Fat Tuesday, on Mardi Gras. I always hated this holiday because it's like a whole holiday dedicated to fakeness. And I have on the screen 2 Mardi Gras masks from Carnival or whatever, right? And everyone always likens our present world order post 2014 to be clown world. And everything feels kind of like the eternal carnival. The eternal procession of a bunch of pantomimes, and we can never know what's real or what's fake, nor are we really expected to discern what's real and what's fake. We're just expected to react emotionally to what we're experiencing, and not really to come into any greater communion with what's going on. And I don't know, I feel like there's a reason why it feels like Fat Tuesday is kind of a cursed day. I don't know anything I know tons of things that come as sort of cultural fixtures of Mardi Gras, but they almost always seem to be of a demonic nature. There always seem to be a very menacing aspect of this particular day before Ash Wednesday. Like, this is the final moment of Satan's deception. The thing. I mean, there's tons of horror stories that obviously come from Mardi Gras. The two ones I always remember are, of course, Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado, which takes place in Mardi Gras in an Italian city with a masked party and this guy that has this insane notion of revenge. And then also the strange Twilight Zone episode where these people wear Mardi Gras masks and they're somehow deformed into better representations of the very sins that they reflect. And the whole symbol, it's sort of like the devil's playground. Like, this is the last day of falsity before we have to come to terms with ourselves, where we have to kind of look at where we are as a people. I think that's really what I want to get at. And this is going to be a short talk. I don't really have a ton to say. Hopefully people will give me some questions to answer. But this is where we really are at as a movement and as a culture. I'm sick of fake things. I'm sick of fake things online. I'm sick of clout chasing. And not that I ever really was big on clout chasing to begin with. But I really want this period of Ash Wednesday and Lent to be one where I come in contact with more of the real things that I have around me, even if they are sort of brutally ugly, even if it is the desert of the real. And I hope other people take an opportunity to do the same. I know like tons of people are going off Twitter for Lent. I certainly am. Or, trying to get back into a pattern of prayer. I certainly am. Hopefully there will be at least be a few people still using social media accounts. Copy that famous line from Family Guy or whatever, where there's a nerd convention and the guy goes, "Who's manning the internet?" I guess somebody has to be shitposting. But it's funny because I've been back on Twitter properly for 6 months, and it's such. I can see why it's so depressing. It's a very powerful tool for making contacts and staying abreast of news. But it's depressing because it keeps you in a constant dopamine cycle of fakeness and fake outrage and fake fear, and then fake relief, but it also at the same time you have to kind of watch people who to be better than sort of just shit posters constantly shit post, and to yourself that these people have deep thoughts and they have deep perspectives on the world and they have deep ambitions. But in this medium of the attention economy, everyone's just trying to grab for the next thing. Everyone's trying to grab for the next shiny thing and write it because that's how the game is played. That's sort of that's how the Ready Player One video game goes, and the person who wins that wins the internet. And I don't know what they get to do this as a living. Who would want that? Who would want to be an influencer as a living? I know a few people who were able to. I guess Sargon seems roughly to be very psychologically healthy. I think he's very resilient. Maybe he's kind of like Frodo is to he is to Frodo. He is to the internet as Frodo is to the One Ring. Strangely, immune to its maddening impulses. But every other streamer, from Natalie Wynn to Vosh, seems to have completely, they've come away scathed by this force of social media. It's absolutely degrading to one's mental health. The only way out of this is for us to build in the real world, and then to only connect online for particular moments and particular things. To use the internet as a connective tissue for real life communities, to organize and coordinate. there was a time when we said the internet is where we are strong. Right now, I think real life is where we have to take the next step. People cannot get stronger without grounding themselves and in their opinions in a real life context. And I said this before, this is why I've been pushing basket weaving so hard the last month or so. It's because I feel so strongly that people need to come in contact with other people who think like them, and they need to come in contact with other people who are dedicated to actually solving the problem, who say to themselves, yes, I see what the problem is, and I know there needs to be a solution for it. Maybe we don't have a solution for it right now, but this is what needs to be done. And see what comes from that. You know, the whole point of basket weaving is not, I mean, people say, oh, this is a fellowship. Well, no, it's actually something that's more basic than that. This is just a meeting place for minds from which can grow fellowships. It's much more basic. We don't have any founding creed, or we don't have any ideological requirements other than, you know, a basic set of decency, requirements of decency. And, you know, I've written at length about what it means to be dissident and what it means to be right wing. You know, the I lost my train of thought there, guys. Sorry, I read the chat. In order to kind of take the next step for anybody, in order for anyone to take the next step, to make themselves more mature leaders, and at this point, we all need to be leaders, whether we're leaders of families or whether we're just trying to survive this crisis of modernity. People have to come in contact with real world problems and discuss them with other people and see how they're handling those real world problems. Only then can you really know how to correctly use the internet and how to correctly curate your use of it so that its own degrading effects don't overwhelm the benefit it has for you personally. And that's the only way I think, you know, you can kind of overcome the desert of the real in community. And is spiritual fulfillment part of this? I think so. I think it has to be. You know, I just this last day, there was another absolutely fake fight between people on Lomez's side, you know, of the people who are kind of mainstreaming Bappian ideas and First Things, that Lomez got a piece about the Longhouse and published by First Things. And of course, a lot of Catholics, including many people I deeply respect, were highly upset about this, including a bunch of trolls like our friend Matt McManus, who, you know, I don't think has skin in this game and is intentionally trying to capsize a productive dialogue for self-serving purposes. But this is, you know, there are a lot of upsetness about obviously there are ideological differences between Bronze Age pervert and the Nietzschean wing of the right and Catholics. But this is something that needs to be discussed and confronted. And we need to learn from this confrontation. We don't need to shun it, and we don't need to not understand each other. And it's all of these fights, if they're instantiated, if they're represented by real people who you respect, and who you can talk to like real people, then spiritual growth is possible. Obviously, the BAP people and the Longhouse people believe that spiritual growth is possible and necessary. And we have different opinions on this. They have different opinions on this than us on the Christian side. But this needs to be part of a collective effort, because only in community do men grow in spirituality and are able to hold themselves to actual standards. And it's only from cutting ourselves off to a certain degree from our addictions that we can even get the presence of mind long enough to confront the real things that God's trying to tell us. And I do think that we need to be listening more and consuming less. And, you know, maybe this, well, not maybe, but certainly if you are Christian or Catholic, this should be the moment where you're considering doing this for a certain period of time. Maybe discarding a consumption habit altogether. But we need to be listening more to that which is around us, and thinking about what is really called. What God is really calling us to do in this moment. I wouldn't say necessarily a moment of total crisis, but a moment of minor crisis, a moment of decision. And to see what we can actually put together in our real lives and how we can build this into something larger. I know I won't show this every time I get on the air, but I really do encourage people that if you're interested in building, reach out to me, reach out to anyone else, get involved in basket weaving. There's a link in the description of this video. You can also DM me on Twitter. My DMs on Twitter will be open, and I'll try to point you in the right direction. A lot of people have communities already, but a lot of us are isolated. And you're not doing any favors for yourself isolating yourself in this present world, I don't think. Unless you're some kind of hermit who's taken unless you're a very, very spiritually evolved person who's in some kind of hermetic study. Anyway, guys, that is the end of this talk. I'm not so sure I'm going to actually do a Super Chat intermission. Well, maybe I will, actually. It's been about half an hour. A little bit shorter of a talk this time because I didn't have anything really prepared. But I'll do sort of the intermission right now, and I'll be back very shortly to answer Super Chats and to finish out the rest of this live stream with the reading of a poem. Talk to you later. Okay, very short intermission this time because I'm trying to keep things a little bit more tight this time. I do intend this Lenten season to have more guests on. Oftentimes, I only have a real good talk planned every other week. It's hard to come up with something every week, especially since I'm trying to do other things. And so it's a little bit better, I think, if I can mix up these conversations with having live streams with guests at Tuesdays and then have the standard talk basically every other Tuesday, so I can have a little bit more time to work on it. Anyway, I'm going to get onto your super chats. I see a few people, in the chat. Someone talked to me. It said chatbot GPT is to writing what calculators are to arithmetic. I guess a little bit. You're right in that sense that they can't tell you what to write. Unfortunately, for the classic way we construe essay prompts, it's going to be very, very hard to determine plagiarism because of ChatGPT. Because, at least for the time being, our ability to fake writing has exceeded our ability to detect it. So that's a little bit unnerving. But it's not going to ultimately mean, I think, very much. Because what we have right now in terms of this AI stuff is basically just an advanced form of machine learning that can imitate things that it's trained on and not do very much else. There's no internal understanding model it has of the universe that's anything like what a human has in their imagination. It's just what human behavior is like. Let's train this on human behavior. So still very much like your standard machine learning models with some more sophisticated layers, controlled dispersion and all this stuff. So anyway, I'm going to go on to the first super chat. Hopefully my comment pinning is working. Well, at least I have to get rid of this image. And here we go. Okay, Ben White for $5 USA. Hi, Dave. I planned a last-minute coffee meetup with the girl after work last week. I guess this is the Latin mass girl you've been pursuing? She accepted on quick notice. I enjoyed our conversation. However, she did admonish me for picking Starbucks due to their support for Planned Parenthood. Based? Kind of based. I don't know, Ben White. It depends on your taste in women. In my own taste in women, I put a very, 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 very high premium on women with a sense of humor, which is anyone who's met my wife knows that she has a great sense of humor and she laughs at all my jokes. And that's certainly not the only reason why I married her, but a big reason of why I fell in love with her was that if she admonished me for something like choosing Starbucks for a date, it would be mostly a joke. And, obviously I know a lot of women who are very serious about pro-life work to the point where that admonition might not be so jocular and it might be more serious. And you have to kind of choose your power levels at this stage, right? Because women have to kind of, if they're into politics and they're into reactionary politics, even if it's right-wing politics, they still have to acknowledge you as the political leader. So, you can't have a political challenge come to yourself, even from your right, in my opinion, because that creates a sovereignty crisis in the relationship. And that doesn't mean that she can't have her activism or her own opinions, or you can't disagree on things at all. But she can't treat a political disagreement she has with you as a reason to think of you as less of a man or less of a leader. And for that reason, having a sense of humor and her political opinions, I would consider to be a plus, even if the opinion she has in this case is pretty based. But thank you very much, Ben White. Godspeed with your continued attempts to find Miss Right. Miss Right, and then make her Mrs. Right, I should say. Tilda the Yagan for $25 USA. Hey Dave, love the recent content. I was wondering if you have any good arguments for convincing the unbelievers that we are in fact in a great decay as a civilization. I keep seeing people put out hope endlessly into repeating the false ascendancy narratives that never actually come to anything real. How do we get them to see this? Well, to me it's pretty obvious, just along the lines I just brought up. And when was the last time you saw a movie that was really moving? When was the last time that we had a really distinctly new musical style? It's been 20 or so years since we had a really very new musical style. And the cinema has been really degrading. Where is art house cinema these days? Is that even a thing anymore? It doesn't feel like it is. And, this is, and also just simple questions like this. What was the last invention you came in contact with that really made your life better? When I got new laptops, every several years when I was, in college or whatever, this is the height of the whole device craze, the era of, a little bit before the iPhone, but very much in that era. Every new laptop was like this new portal to this new world, and there are all these new features. Laptops don't really have any new features anymore. They're the same old boring substrate, the same platform for social media, the same platform for video games. Video games don't advance very much anymore. And to the extent that they do, they're kind of like horrifying and mind-bending and creepy. All of the new inventions we get are creepy. They don't improve anything. Chatbot GPT's ability to falsify an essay by recombining a bunch of essays, recombining a lot of similar writing it's discovered online, and spitting out correct grammatical sentences in a prescribed style, does not improve humans' inclination to write stories. It breaks our ability to properly enforce non-plagiarism rules. All of these things are degrading humanity's ability to properly interact with the physical world and improve it around us. Our ability to get consistently good products on the shelves is degrading. Our ability to have consistently reliable supply chains is degrading. To me, it's just apparent. Is anyone just have more hope for the future, believe that they're going to have more opportunities in the future to work a fulfilling life and a fulfilling job? To me, the answer just seems definitively no. I don't see how this is at all going to happen. And I think you can see this in sort of the increased incidence of sort of hopelessness. I don't think that this hopelessness is necessarily so well grounded. I think that a lot of it is just a reaction to overstimulation in social media. And I think that there's a lot more hope out there if you actually look for it. But the fact of decline from where we were in the 90s just seems to be obviously apparent. I don't know. No, is Joe Biden an administration that's just full of hope? I don't think so. The cultist of Shub-Negarath The Goat in the Woods with 1,000 Young for $3 USA. As an aspiring author, I find a rising unease in the prospect of having to face progressive institutions, when any form of real expression would be crushed alongside any future career. Well, I have to say, cultist of Shub Nagareth, I think you might be... I might have a white pill for you. Our ability to create alternative publishing houses seems to be a problem that has been... It's in the process of being overcome. The Passage Prize was a financial success. I think the quality could be improved, but that's where you guys come in, right? That's where the authors out there come in. But the financial problem has in some sense been overcome. We've got Substack, we've got physical publications. People buy them, people read them, people review them, people discuss them, and I think there's a new growing group of intellectuals and critics that appreciate them. I don't know exactly how this is going to grow. Obviously, what we have right now is we have a disconnect between intellectuals that are really kind of having interesting ideas and striking off in new directions, and the more artsy conformist types that just like putting on a show, who've all kind of gone with the cathedral and have been captured by sort of social media cul-de-sacs that are basically woke monocultures. But I don't think that you as an author necessarily have anything to be pessimistic about. From what I'm seeing this year, we have all sorts of opportunities. And I don't think that if you submit to sort of a radical publication that's going to curtail you from being considered in the mainstream in the future. There was another article in Vanity Fair that highlighted sort of that sort of new right sphere that's going on, the scene in New York that's going on, the scene in a lot of other metropolitan areas where they're kind of right leaning, but at the same time they're not really. They're more bohemian types. And this is something this is a very exciting development, because once you're featured in Vanity Fair, I think that the mainstream institution's ability to contain you has been very much curtailed. Right now, I think that the mainstream is really at a low point in its ability to cancel people. The enthusiasm of the progressive lobbyists is just at a low ebb, and nobody really knows what to make with it anymore. The people who are still hysterical over politics have transparent mental problems and transparent problems with their own psychological health, and people are looking for something that's new and real and invigorated. And if you're an author who just dabbles in or even is explicitly right-wing, it's not very apparent how that immediately hurts you, or how you won't have opportunities to publish for perhaps a right-wing audience. And so I don't know. I think that that might be a genuine white pill as far as I can tell. All right, going on. Asteroidal Assassin for $20 USA. Congratulations, you've been transposed into an alternative reality. You have two regions to choose to live in. The West region has a very familiar culture and a European populace. There is a catch. They are majority Muslim. The East has a religion that is Arab, Muslim, and Eastern, but it is a majority Catholic. Which region do you choose? Well, that's a hard one for me to answer. Asteroidal Assassin. Because, look, it's hard for me to answer because of the Muslim thing. It would be easier for me if we were pagan. It would really depend on life circumstances. Because if I saw people who were my people following a religion that I felt to be false, I'd feel an obligation to convert them to the correct religion. And I might feel that I'll be better situated by living amongst my own people and being a witness. However, if for whatever reason that whole witness option wasn't available to me and I'd face religious persecution, my only option would be to live in a country that had more Arabic or Middle Eastern culture. I could see pulling that off. I do have great friends that are Lebanese. I had a lot of great friends who were Coptic Christians. And maybe Lebanese and Coptic Christians are still too close to my own Catholic Central European culture to really, play into your thought experiment correctly. And really what you want me to think of is some kind of, like, I don't know, like deep desert Arab that would have, like, Christian that I'd have like zero in common with. And that would be a lot harder, right? I mean, there are all sorts of Christian cultures that I would have zero in common with. Like, I have the humility to say that. Like, if you put me amongst a bunch of Sudanese Christians or Christians from Rwanda, I would share a faith with them. But the cultural language I would have in common with them and the disconnect ethnically would be massive. And I would have huge culture shock. I would have a very difficult time functioning. And I'd be very, very isolated, despite the fact that I could practice my religion in peace. So, I mean, it would depend on so many different things that aren't part of your thought experiment. I would have to kind of design my life around how I could best thrive. How would I best thrive being part of a cultural island inside a sea of co-believers, or an island of faith inside a sea of sort of heretics, I guess you could say. But I mean, to answer this question to you, Asteroidal Assassin, I mean, Islam is, like, as far as I'm concerned, is like way closer to what I believe than this modern progressive gender cult is. Like, if I was forced to choose, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. That is so irritating. I thought I silenced my phone. If I was forced to choose between, Islam and this whole progressive Gnostic cult, I guess I'd have to choose Islam. I'd probably choose death as an alternative to the three if that was on the table. But, I hope I choose that. But, I'm very much further away from the primary religion of my own culture right now. But nevertheless, I feel like I have an obligation to stick with my own culture and to sort of help it heal. Maybe this is the end of the West as we know it, and what will continue on is only the smallest of nucleuses. But I have a responsibility to make that nucleus as large as possible, and to get it away from this poisonous stuff that's coming out of progressivism that's leading absolutely nowhere. Okay, well, thank you very much, Asteroidal Assassin. Very interesting thought experiment. I apologize for the interruption of me not silencing my phone. Intermezzo for $3 USA. Hi, Dave. We met a long time ago on the Discord server. I recently accepted a job as a professor with good job security and a salary. Well, congratulations, Intermezzo. How can I best guide and help trainees who are right-leaning? Look, as a professor, tell them to pursue give them advice on how they can pursue their own conscience and their own intellectual curiosities and avoid cancellation as best they can. And tell them that they should always pursue truth and inquiry over the risk of cancellation. Don't constrain your research so that it fits into some DEI statement that you're anticipating having to write. We all know that universities require you to write DEI statements, but you don't want to end up like Matt McManus. I mean, I kind of pity the guy, to be quite honest. I mean, all of his opinions are just sort of predictable on this progressive template of opinions that are exactly the kind of opinions you're supposed to have as a university professor. And I don't know, I think his ability to engage in real inquiry on the very subject of his expertise is hugely curtailed. So yeah, that's what I would tell people, Intermezzo. And yeah, and congratulations on the position. I would also really advise you to try to help them build community of people who are non-progressives that might be in town. I think it might be time for that. I think a lot of people of the older generation, maybe not baby boomers, because I think baby boomers, a lot of them have just agreed to check out. But it's time to start reaching out to the older generation and go like, okay, guys, like we want a future, right? We want to have actual a future that's hopeful for our children and our grandchildren. And I don't see how the left is really delivering this. I see how the left is delivering a bunch of despair here. So what the hell is going on? And these are the times to have these conversations, because although I don't think that these conversations are ever going to be allowed to persist in the mainstream, I do think that there is a large group of people. There's a large group of people who are ready to listen at this stage. Okay, so thank you, Intermezzo, and I hope to hear from you again. If you spoke to me on Discord and you have a Discord, please, maybe just take a look at basket weaving and see if there's any people in your area that you might be interested in meeting up with you. So really, I think what we've learned from this whole basket weaving endeavor is that real life burns off the crazy. Every now and again, you have a crazy showing up to a real life event, but that's very, very, very rare, and it doesn't usually have any exterior impacts. My one misadventure with President Sunday notwithstanding, right? Usually most of the time, crazy people and internet psychos stay away from real life gatherings because they're easily exposed as frauds and creeps by people there. And especially if there's more than just two people there to begin with. So I find the basket weaving project to be typically very safe. These are not protests. No one's there taking pictures of you. So usually you're pretty safe to speaking in. People are just having drinks and talking about things. So I like to highly encourage that. Anyway, Applied Virtue. I kind of already answered this one for $10. Well, hi, Applied Virtue. Old friend of the channel, used to go by Ghost of Buckley. Did you ever think, what do you think of ChatGPT? I think it is to storytelling what calculators are to mathematics. Do you disagree? I kind of disagree in the sense that, the problem is that in storytelling, the way you tell the story, the flow of your language and what you pause on is a huge part of the storytelling process. And developing your own voice is a huge part of the storytelling process. If you do things like, I have like a role-playing game and now I'm going to type it into ChatGPT is going to fit that into a variety of different modes and flavors, and it's going to come off feeling very, very disjointed. And in the meantime, you're not going to grow it as a writer. The reason why calculators are so useful for calculations is that there's only one way to do the calculation. And it's 100% objective. And there's no way to sort of mismatch that to what you're trying to create artistically. And there's certain sort of art in coding, and there's a certain sort of art in algorithm development, which is one reason why, we're so far away from this replacing programmers. And we're so far away from this being actual general AI, is that these are not very well understood things. And you can't just train people on behavior to do this. What was I going to say here? Yeah, I just wouldn't recommend it to use Chatbot GPT that way. I think what's closer to a calculator for storytelling is something like Grammarly, to make sure that you have the sentences like structured in the right way with the commas in the right place. But I think that making the perfect sentence is so important to developing the right story. Just think about, welcome to the desert of the real, right? You want that to kind of come from your own creative process and not be a recombination of a bunch of snappy lines from similar stories that ChatGPT found in its databases and recombined in a structurally pleasing way, right? Like you want that to actually come from your experience of the world. This is what a lot of people don't get about storytelling, and real storytelling comes from like the moment, right? There's this. I remember this. I took a creative writing seminar back in college. I was an engineering student. I took a creative writing seminar, and you read the the same. It feels like you always read the same 20 stories in creative writing seminars. You read the Lottery, you read another Shirley Jackson one, you read The Things They Carried by O'Brien, and you read the Ursula K. Le Guin story, Those Who Walk Away from Uranus or whatever. And then you also read that Castaneda story, The Old Man with Giant Wings, about this Mexican family or something. I forget who wrote that story, but it's about this it's about this Mexican family or the Central American family that finds what they think is an angel, and who doesn't appear to have any, very angelic qualities to it. And I remember reading the story and not being able to make heads or tails of it. And my creative writing teacher said, there's almost no way that this guy thought of the story and then inserted an old man with giant wings into it. He just had the vision of an old man with giant wings when he was doing something, in his real life. And then instantly, the story kind of built itself around it, right? So the thing with storytelling is that oftentimes you kind of want to let the moment and the language of the moment flower forward into the story itself, and not just have an outline of what happens and feed that into a language processor. That seems like a way to get a very, very bad and blocky story. Modular stories are not very good stories. Flowing stories are good stories. Striking stories are. So anyway, that's my advice. Applied virtue. Thanks for writing in. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. A while ago, you said something about the 2000s being a trashy cultural dead zone regarding movies. It rings true, but what did you mean by that? Well, I mean, the 2000s, I mean, relative to now, it's great. But what I mean about that is that in the 90s, in the 90s, there was this whole panoply of independent movies that would come out periodically and that would be challenging. And I had a whole club that was dedicated just to watching independent movies and old independent movies. And then sometime in the 2000s, for whatever reason, the independent movie kind of died. And I'm not so sure why it died. And it kind of became absorbed into internet novelties for some reason. And also the thing is that movies stopped meaning so much anymore. So for instance, there was The Matrix, which was a seminal movie. And then there was Lord of the Rings, which is another seminal movie. And then after Lord of the Rings was really the last one. It kind of went on to producing sort of these movies that were franchise movies. I think, Star Wars, the first Star Wars prequel trilogy was the first one of those things. And all movies kind of had to have sort of a formula to them and an audience that was built in. And people started expecting less from their movies. They expected, the reason to go to the movie was because there was some kind of internet buzz around it. The reason to go to the movie was that there was some kind of meme attached to it. And as such, the act of going to the movies kind of meant less and less and less and less. It became less of a holy moment being in the theater and more of just a process of participating in a fan community that was being captured elsewhere online. And maybe we'll see the end of this process as it stands currently, but it'll be interesting to see. Thank you, Asteroidal Assassin. I'll keep on going here. Ben White for $3 USA. The Church of England is considering a gender-neutral language for God. Is it uncharitable to call Anglicans Anglicucks? So many heresy and societal rot has come out of that institution. Well, yeah, I know some conservative Anglicans, so I guess it's not all like that. But, I mean, gender-neutral language for God. I mean, I don't know. The problem is that it's so transparently stupid, because let's say, for instance, that you did believe, for whatever silly reason you might, that human beings got to pick their own gender, whatever that means, and that it was an essential property of their rights, or their due respect they are owed, that their preferred gender be expressed in the pronouns that they use for themselves. if you genuinely believe the proposition that I just laid out about gender affirming pronouns being a fundamental element of human dignity and respect, and you also believed in the real existence of this thing called God, then why would you use gender-neutral pronouns for God when God has so definitively, in his own witness of himself, used exclusively masculine pronouns to describe himself through the holy witness of those who have spoken to him, and how which even he's spoken about himself, if you believe in the incarnation, right? You believe that God comes to us bearing masculine pronouns, even though, quite ironically, God is the one thing that appears to have a gender language ascribed to him, even in my view, that does not have a sex in English, right? But it's very clear from God's own, revealed preference. I feel dirty using progressive language, that his preferred way of relating to us is masculine. And, there's a deeper theology to this too, if you only peel back the surface, right? When God relates to humanity, the relationship is of a bride, humanity, to a bridegroom, God. He is the masculine role and we are the feminine role. We are receiving of him and we are preparing to receive from him. And that is the role we are to have. And regardless if you believe God's masculinity going deeper than that sort of relational gender of God is just obviously imbued in the scripture. I really don't know what to say about church leadership. We're having so many problems with it at this time, I can hardly keep track of what's going on. I am so deeply saddened about what my own church is doing to the Latin Mass practicing Catholics. I think it's a disgrace. I think that they've been faithful to the Holy See and the Pope, and I feel that their loyalty is being repaid with, just an act of pure cruelty for absolutely no good theological reason whatsoever. And it's just sad. I don't know what to say about modern clergy. All I can say is they don't know the damage that they're doing to their own church. Rotten Meat for $20 USA. What is it we should do besides Mardi Gras and video games? What is it we should do besides Mardi Gras and video games? Well, I hate both of those things, so you're asking the wrong person. Where is the grand work we should be dedicating every hour of every day? God's commands have ends. He does not demand a Protestant work ethic. He gives time for rest. My best memories of Mardi Gras remain from atop my dad's shoulders, and I'm not burying it. Well, I guess I'm not saying you can't celebrate Mardi Gras if you want to. I'm just saying that the holiday to me has always felt kind of bizarre and chaotic and twisted in a way, and it never sat right with me for whatever reason. But that could be my own personal failing. Obviously, Mardi Gras celebrations have been something that Catholic cultures the world around have celebrated for 1,000 years at this stage, and most churches haven't cracked down on it or condemned it outright. So, absolutely, if that's part of your culture, I'm not putting that down in any way. And certainly if it's part of a beloved ethnic tradition, I don't want to put that down at all either. It's just something that I have a difficult time relating to because of this deep kind of aversion of fakeness and deception. Iron Duke for $5 USA. Dave, I would really like to do a stream with you, especially as you are American and I am British. Well, hey, Iron Duke, that's a good idea. Maybe the rule will be going forward that every other week will be a stream with a guest, and then the even weeks or whatever will be streams with sort of more of a monologue focus. That will give me sort of my mind sort of time to recover, and it'll also allow me to kind of give more airtime to people who deserve to have more airtime, help the community out a little bit, and help people develop their own voices and get new perspectives too. I feel like sometimes I have the things I like talking about and they get way too overly stale on these live streams. But that's a great idea. I'd love to have you on, Iron Duke. You're a longtime friend. Novum for $5 USA. I come to terms with an unfortunate truth. Adult women that are still hardcore Disney fans are just as bad as male weeboos. I used to think they weren't as degenerate until I went to the apartment of a few dates. Yikes. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like that's a pretty harmless obsession, right? I guess if they just like if they have like a Disney princess that they really like or a Disney store that they really like, then I guess that's very understandable. And I mean, she's a girl, right? I mean, like you got to give girls space to be girls, and I think that has to be understood. But I guess where I kind of it would kind of become creepy for me if it became clear that this is sort of like a knee jerk. I'm going to consume anything that has the Disney label on it. As soon as Disney shits out something, I will jump on it right away. In the immortal words of Red Letter Media, don't ask questions, just consume product and get excited for new product. If this girl is in the mode of don't ask questions, just consume princess and get excited for next Disney princess, that might be a little bit of a red flag. But if she just likes Belle from Beauty and the Beast or something like that, I don't know. I mean, cut the girl some slack, right? Even if she does have a lot of paraphernalia or whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't know the weeboo. I give the weeboos way too hard of a time, but it's just I don't want to kind of flog it at horse here at all because that's been going on for way too long. Novum for $3 USA. Glad that The Last of Us is at least as successful an adaptation of a TV show from a video game. That said, I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. Can people just admit that zombies are a setting now? What do you mean? Like, well, of course, zombie apocalypse is a setting. You mean like that it's a tired setting? I mean, it's been way overdone in the last 20 years. In the 90s, there were almost no zombie movies. And then in the 2000s, the zombie movies just kept on coming and coming and coming and coming and coming until they consumed like all culture. It was really bizarre. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Last of Us, the problem with The Last of Us is that The Last of Us, the video game, was basically a movie that had a video game attached to it. And so it was more or less paint by numbers to get that video game to be a TV show or a movie or something like that. Is it anything that's really profound? It seems like it's a better than average zombie movie, a lot along the lines of a Mega Man, but I don't know. I mean, what makes The Last of Us sort of profound is the familial relationship between father and daughter. That's what gives the movie, the culture, its gravity. And what does that mean in a culture that doesn't really have an understanding of gender or family as being sacred? Or as kind of the meaning, the connection uniquely that exists between a father and his daughter. And yeah, I know for The Last of Us fans, I know that the main character is not the main character. Ellie, I think her name is not Joel's literal daughter. She's obviously a surrogate for a daughter that died, but that's obviously the relationship they develop, and that's the backdrop of it. But again, the reason why this isn't, our present culture can't really connect with this archetype very well is because we're just so far away from familial connections being primal for us. Anyway, going on, Novum for $10 USA. An older video you had laid out is a plan on how to combat ideas in an IRL progressive space. That was from really long. It was called Combating Progressive Institutions, and the last video was called something like Striking from Within the Walls. Since the day I watched it, it has worked for me IRL on preventing many spaces I'm in from being possessed by the far left. So I wanted to thank you for that I could tell stories, but I'll leave it at that. Well, thank you very much, Novum. So, by the way, the core message for preventing progressive institutions, or sort of surviving progressive institutions, is to not sort of array yourself against them as an explicit enemy, but to kind of take a passive-aggressive attitude and to kind of get an intuitive sense of which people in the group are sort of the fanatics and which people are the people who are just kind of along for the ride, or who kind of like they're into this belief, but only as kind of a side thing, and they're interested in other things that are outside this belief system. And if you understand that, that reality and are able to kind of make use of it, and you can actually connect with people who are progressive but not fanatics, and at the same time avoid cancellation, while making sure that any discussion you're in is not just you capitulating, right? Use negative opinions and skepticism to your advantage, and only agree to conversations on your own terms, and in a term that's actually honest, under conditions that are actually a contest of honest persuasion. And that being said, I'll go on. Nerve AMV Maker for $15 USA. Rewatched The Little Mermaid with my sisters. Wow, all these Disney questions. Rewatched The Little Mermaid with my sisters, kids, and was struck at how empty it was compared to the original story. Even in the 80s, he means, although Little Mermaid was 1989, I think, so very end of the 80s. Even in the 80s, this hollowing out of culture was happening. Anderson was a great fabulist of Victorian Christianity, and his stories are far too spiritual and too tragic for this age. Yes, absolutely. I hated The Little Mermaid because I loved the Hans Christian Andersen short story, which had, people remember the Hans Christian Andersen short story because it ends with the image of the Little Mermaid crying herself into salt water because she failed to secure the heart of the prince. But they're forgetting that there's a more beautiful and uplifting fate for the mermaid after that, where she's given sort of the possibility of eternal salvation. That was a much greater love, and so the lesson is a much more divine one about how you can kind of deceive yourself into falling for romantic love when there's much a greater love around you, and the greatest love you can have for somebody sometimes is to give them up, and to not sort of put yourself in between them and who they're destined for. And it deals with real human perception. Well, I guess the Little Mermaid isn't human, but it's such a beautiful story, and the Little Mermaid itself is so Bowdlerized, I think is the term for it, that it's really quite tragic. And I very much sympathize with that. That's the whole Roald Dahl thing of them editing Roald Dahl stories and taking out passages they don't like is absolutely atrocious and disgusting. I'm going to try to find the original stories before they actually change those things. And I might buy them this weekend, but I really want my kid to grow up with the Roald Dahl stories because they're very delicious. And I'll say this: Disney isn't all evil. They had in the 2000s to kind of make up for I think this is sort of them trying to do penance for their misdeeds done to other Hans Christian Andersen's properties. For their short story submission, I think it was in 2007, they did a short story, Buena Vista, which is Disney's artsy branch. They did a submission of The Little Match Girl, which was more or less 100% faithful reimagining, a Disney-fied version of Little Match Girl. And of course, The Little Match Girl is way more depressing than The Little Mermaid, and it's way more bleak, and it exists unlike The Little Mermaid, which has a story and like a moral to it. The Little Match Girl is inserted into the Hans Christian Andersen stories basically just to make your kid cry for no reason whatsoever. It has like an implication of obviously a hereafter. But it just exists to be sad, and so Disney did that one as their submission for their art house thing, and no one ever saw it, and that was their attempt to at a mea culpa and going like, look, we could not butcher Hans Christian Andersen. We can do his saddest story without actually tearing apart the ending, and so I always remember that as a good piece of art. Sam153 for $10 USA. Evening, Dave. What do you make of the recent anti-war protests? Bush-era protest levels are nowhere to be seen, predictably. Well, I think it's a chance to make allies, actually, Sam. I want to know. I would actually go to one of those anti-war protests and just listen to what people have to say, and it's just stand there and just ask questions about why is this war so important for us to continue? Why aren't people seeking peace on terms of status quo? Is Crimea so important that almost 100,000? Well, is it almost 100,000 people at this stage? I don't think I'm getting that number wrong. I think we're up to that point. Like, a lot of people have died in this war, right? Maybe that's way up. Maybe it's like 10,000. I don't know. But like an enormous number of people have died in this war, so that Putin can't claim Crimea permanently, so that we can't give him a guarantee that Ukraine won't join NATO, so that we can make sure that one quasi-democratic, absolutely corrupt, Eastern European politician can rule over Ukraine as opposed to another one. Oh man, that's absolutely positively nuts. That's absolutely nuts, man. This is so irresponsible, and it just shows you how bloodthirsty the present establishment of the global American empire actually is. And you just know that a lot of people at this anti-war protest will be genuine people on the left who just don't understand why all of a sudden all of the zeal for saving lives and putting down the drum for the fiddle and beating our swords to plowshares, they're all wondering why we're not applying that logic here, and why we're risking a Cuban Missile Crisis confrontation with Russia. Why are we doing this here? I wonder what they're saying now. They might be interested to understand that there are a lot of right-wingers that feel very similar to them. And they might see right-wingers in a different way. And that might be a way to open up doors. 2023 is, it will always be a time for building bridges into the future. But this is I think where we really take the first steps to building up connections in real life with other people who are feeling the same way about modernity that we are. And thank you, Sam53. I very much appreciate the super chat. I'm going to go on to Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. Thank you very much. A while ago, you mentioned kiwi farms. The website is degenerate. What is your reasoning? Well, yeah, the website's degenerate. I dislike kiwi farms. But the only reason why I mentioned kiwi farms is because it was the target of another absolutely degenerate and, I think, predatory person, Keffels. And it was my opinion that if I had to choose between being ruled by two absolutely degenerate people, the degenerates that were just circulating gossip, and semi-pornographic gossip, were better than the degenerates that were trying to censor gossip sites in the name of covering up an operation that, I'm not going to mince words, seemed quite plausibly designated to groom children into a transgender lifestyle at a very, very young age. Minors, even. And so it was really a lesser of two evils thing. I don't defend kiwi farms in the abstract at all. I only commented on it as being the front of battle between us and this absolute enemy that I think we see in Keffels. And I don't even really want to mention that person because I think that they're sort of a person who thrives in negative publicity. And I don't want to have anything to do with that person whatsoever. And no one else should either. Ben White for $5 USA. The way the culture is going, especially with transgenderism, will cause transhumanism to surge in popularity and will cause eugenics to make a comeback. What are your thoughts on eugenics and transhumanism? Are they connected? Well, the problem with this, Ben White, is, in the abstract eugenics, you can obviously genetic health waxes and wanes in human populations over time, and being in contact with a very, very ordered system of marriage and mate selection creates a system where the human race gradually gets better and improves cognitively. If you look at people like Edward Dutton, right? And that's the natural process. The problem with like artificial eugenics is that there's no way to control it. And once you're modifying humanity itself and humanity's moral perceptions, which will naturally be the product of eugenics, you kind of close the loop, so to speak, on your moral system. You're relying on human moral systems to control eugenics that controls human moral systems. This is absolutely meaningless. And what you have is sort of a runaway system. And there's no reason to believe that an out-of-control eugenic system isn't going to degenerate into just self-indulgence and absolutely unhealthy specimens of humanity, and how it's not just going to result in complete chaos. Obviously, if you read C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man, he walks through all steps of the argument very succinctly, but you can see these problems going on anywhere if you look at this thing. There's no way. You could imagine like a perfect eugenics regime where you just you filter out genetic diseases and nothing else. And this is just a way to get rid of cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia and Tay-Sachs syndrome and maybe a few other, problems with brains that occur genetically. But that the problem is controlling the use of that technology is going to be very, very difficult. And once this gets to become a consumer grade, who knows what's going to happen? This becomes immediately a weapon in the hands of governments to control populations, and at that point, the idea that we're going to have a healthy application of this becomes absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. And people just become sort of they either become sort of gods amongst themselves, or they become a slave caste to masters that are using genetic control to keep them subjugated very, very quickly. Or they're using genetics to keep them subjugated in perpetuity. Okay. Julio for $15 USA. I wouldn't say, Julio says, I wouldn't say we are oversaturated with podcasts. Regular conservatives might have a lot of opinions, but I think he means dissident right people, only have a few that are actually worth listening to. Fiddler's Green, Caribbean Rhythms, Kashuta are all enjoyable, and at least 2/3 have regular scheduled programming. I also think that, Academic Agent has got some podcasts that are very good. The Good Old Boys is one of my personal favorites. The Jay Burden Show is very good. A lot of the people out of the Old Glory Club are very, very good. I would list a bunch of other creators I like, but I usually like them for non-live stream stuff. Like, I really like The Prudentialist, but I do much more like his written stuff. And a lot of other people I feel just do better. They do better in writing than they do in podcast live stream form. I'm not even so sure that I like myself in live stream form. I much prefer, I don't really feel proud of any live stream I ever do. I only feel proud of the stuff that I write or that I make into actual edited videos. But I do appreciate that people listen to these things, and I'm told repeatedly that people prefer live streams. So I do them for people, for the edification of the community. And really, guys, the money here is great because it helps me justify the time I spend here and help with my family budget. But I do this for the community, for building things, not so that you can, not so that I can build clout or that I can live off this stuff or whatever, right? I don't want to be I don't want to be like a scene or an entertainment product. I always remember listening to Demon Mama, and there's this sort of brainless bread tube streamer of the Vosh variety. And they're constantly promoting themselves as an entertainment product. Will always be funny. Will always be like the place you go for your entertainment and your drama. That's not my job. My job is not to be a drama center. My job is not to be an entertainment product. You're not supposed to be fans of me, although I appreciate you like my podcast. I want to be broadcasting to community members who are looking to build things in their own lives. And you are just the same as I am. it's so bizarre saying that as a reaction. I'm supposed to believe in hierarchy, right? But I really do believe any single person that basket weaves is exactly like me. They're just doing the exact same thing that I'm doing in their own space. And ultimately, the fruits of what they do will be probably about as fruitful as the things that I do here. All I have right now is the volume turned up slightly, right? So, whatever I can do for the community is always, very good. Is always good in my point. Okay. The Joker for $3 USA. Would you consider black culture to be part of the West? If so, what distinguishes it from the mainstream? Well, I kind of have a weird way of dividing it up. I consider African American culture to be a core American culture. There's 3 core American cultures. WASP culture, and it really divides into 2. Southern WASP culture, Northern WASP culture, or 3. Southern WASP culture, Northern WASP culture, and Western WASP culture. And then there's 2 others. There's Native American culture, which is not Western. And then there's African American culture, which is not Western, but has some Western influences. So how I would call Black American culture is I say it's a 100% core American culture. It is a non-Western culture, but it has certain very critical Western contributions inside of itself that shine through. African Americans, and this is what sort of kills me inside, is that, it kills me outside because when I see African Americans in the modern academy, it seems like so many of them have this huge inferiority complex. But really, when it comes down to it, African American culture is one of the more fruitful cultures in terms of literature, in terms of poetry, in terms of music in particular. All of these things, and dance in particular as well. All of these things, like African American culture, has just indelibly changed global culture and enhanced it for the better. And instead, like, people are insecure because there are very few African American astrophysicists, and that's just ridiculous to me. And and so I don't know. I mean, to me, it's sort of like a duckbill platypus. It exists, I think, as a non-Western culture, but one that has very, very clear Western influences and is, again, 100% American. What distinguishes it from the mainstream? For the last 30 years, or for the last 100 years, the mainstream has been kind of taking on board the worst elements of African culture. So I'm not going to really comment on that, but obviously, mainstream American culture is predominantly, basically Anglo. It's predominantly WASP with Ellis Island influences and slight African influences. Whereas African American culture is the reverse, right? African American culture is African in its soul with some very, very distinct and prominent WASP influences. And that's how I would describe it. Okay, Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. That is a question, so I have to double click it. Or I had to double click it here. Okay. He says, I missed part of the stream. Here's some money. Well, thank you, Creeper Weirdo. I appreciate the tip, as always. But I will go on. Novum for $3 USA says, I understand what you mean by healthy Disney obsession versus fanatics, and I agree. I'm not so sure what to think of third-party toys, if you get my drift. Doubt I need to elaborate any further. Well, I don't know, man. I mean, like, just sort of ask her about it, right? Ask her about what she likes so much about, this Disney stuff, I guess. I suppose it's a little bit, it's sort of a symbol that she might have like Asperger's syndrome or something like that, because very few women have sort of these pop culture obsessions that are so deep that they're getting like figurines and stuff like that. That tends to be more of a male brain thing. So, I'd be aware of that, right? But oftentimes when girls collect things, and they'll have some story behind it. So if you can uncover the story behind it, then you're going to you're going to have the I think more respect for her Disney hobby. I mean, girls will be girls, right? I mean, I think that's healthy to say that, right? Yes, the eunuch for $5. I lay here thinking of how no leader is trustworthy and how we can't trust any of those factions who want war. Reflecting upon how fake we know everything is now, I wonder if this is what it is like for people like us during the Brother War era. The Brother War era. You mean like the Civil War? Well, I mean, I guess so. I don't really know. I guess, most people kind of had a side in the Civil War, whereas in the Ukraine War, I think the whole thing is just kind of I guess there were a number of people in the Civil War who felt like peace under conditions of the status quo was an absolute essential feature. But, I think it was really amazing how much both sides just wanted to win it, come hell or high water. And, it's good to think about that, yes. I do think we have leaders that have our interests at heart, yes. I do think that they will emerge, but they're not going to emerge on Twitter. And we have to give other leaders who are sort of more politically compromised room to kind of move around and find their place. And it could be that the Ukraine war will be a teachable moment. I think in hindsight, the leaders that come out as being against or neutral on the Ukraine war are going to end up looking very, very good. And the people that went along with the mainstream and the weapons industry are going to look very, very bad. But I could be wrong about this. Anyway, Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. Not being pushy, but how's the Shrek video coming? Well, I'm thinking of just writing it as an essay, but I have another essay that I want to write first, as always. So it'll have to wait a little while. I don't know when I can get to these things. My time for doing this is fairly limited, but I appreciate the constant pressure to do this video. So thank you, man, for what it's worth. Victor Kamishan for $5 USA. Did you ever make a comparison between the falling Roman Empire and current years? Well, I think really everyone has, and certainly the falling birth rates are an indication of that. The problem is obviously that we don't really have, I mean, I guess we have sort of imminent barbarian invasions from like Africa or whatever, but there are no rival forces that are really the equivalent of something like an Attila the Hun. And for that reason, we're kind of in a historically unique situation that it's hard to really see through direct historical analogy to the fall of Rome. There are a few things that are very, very different. And because of that, it's hard to see exactly how this resolves itself. Antimatter Bone Crusher for $10 USA. The chatbot GPT calculator meme may already address this, but do I think chatbot GPT can be helpful for story brainstorming and plowing through writer's block? It definitely primarily produces vanilla blueprint detritus, but it can help throw some plot dialogue ideas forward and have you continually develop it bit by bit. Yeah, I can see that, Antimatter Bone Crusher. I would highly recommend, though, using recording and rereading your own thoughts. I find that much more useful, but maybe chatbot GPT could be used as a way of recycling your ideas. I mean, if you look at chatbot GPT as just a dialogue remixer in the style of something, it can be much more helpful. But be sure that you predigest anything that comes out of it and make sure that it's your own idea. I would never, ever, ever copy pasta into it. I think that would be I wouldn't consider that to be an artistic crime. Not necessarily equivalent to plagiarism, but I would consider that to be a really big faux pas. I think that you would have to predigest anything you saw coming out of a chatbot before you properly called it your own. Because you really want to make your writing your own ideas. You want to be the final author of them. And that's really your responsibility as a writer to control that. And that's part of you being a writer that people respect, is that you're controlling the fact that you are the author of the words that come out of your mouth. Link for $5 USA. Which country in the West do you think is going to be the first to peel off from the Anglo-American NATO faction? Last time you mentioned Italy, but has that changed? I think that they have Italy by the balls. I think that maybe it will be something like Austria or Poland with any luck. I always hope that Austria and Hungary are going to develop into a permanent alliance against the EU and create sort of like this, well, we want to use the financial instruments of the EU, but we're now an alternative power block inside the economic union, and we want more sovereignty from the decisions being made by Brussels. I always hope that that would be the next step. Maybe that's on my own ethnic predilections towards that. I would feel a certain sympathy for an Austro-Hungarian alliance in that direction. Maybe Poland would want to get on the gang, even though they're culturally very different in that capacity, but that would be my prediction. I am not much of a foreign policy person, though. The person you want to ask about that would be the Prudentialist or Martin Sellner, and I plan to have a stream with Martin Sellner some Saturday in the very near future when I finalize on that. Okay, coming down the line here. Have you seen the return of new openings of Atelier Art School? What do you think? Isn't this a good sign for the future of conservative culture overtaking the ugly postmodern art scene? Well, I did hear about that in passing, Edward Gonzalez, but I have to confess here that I haven't looked into it. If this is indeed sort of a classical or conservative art school that's reopening and trying to rediscover art, then I will be very, very interested in exploring it and seeing what can come out of it. But, I think that there are a lot of questions about, obviously the eternal danger is institutional capture, is ideological capture. All of our institutions are just overwhelmed with these bureaucrats that are just there to maintain the status quo. And, it's to be seen what we can actually do by kind of resurrecting conservative institutions of the variety that you're talking about. But thank you very much, Edward Gonzalez. And with that, I think I'm at the end of my super chats. Perfect, guys. I was considering a Herculean task tonight, since I'm ending so early. Hopefully I didn't close this window. Okay, I was thinking of reading Ash Wednesday by T.S. Eliot. I don't know if this is going to be too ambitious, because it is a very long poem, but I will see if I can give it my best shot, since this is indeed, we are indeed heading into the Vigil on Ash Wednesday. So, oh, come on. Creeper Weirdo, for one more. This is the absolute last one, guys. Before I do the poem here. I was all winding up, and you have to pass me a super chat, dude. Okay, Creeper Weirdo for $5 USA. Is that pinning? One last thing. If you're filling out your reading list, there is a comic series that is written as a socialist satire that the mainstream right-wingers love. It's called Judge Dredd. Look it up on Amazon. Well, yes, I'm a big fan of Judge Dredd. Never so much into the comics, but I kind of was sort of pseudo-aware of them. But I'm aware of Judge Dredd from the board game and the wonderful 2012 movie. And, of course, many, 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 many memes. So, yes, I might look up. I just don't like the art style of the comics that much. But I will definitely look into it. Many good socialist satires in the 1980s ended up being unintentionally based. All right. So that being said, here's something that is intentionally based. T.S. Eliot's Ash Wednesday. For all the Anglicans out there being horrible, here's one who had poetry in his soul. Because I do not hope to turn again, because I do not hope to turn, desiring this man's gift and that man's scope, I no longer strive towards such things. Why should the aged eagle stretch its wings? Why should I mourn the vanished power of the usual rain? Because I do not hope to know the infirm glory of the positive hour. Because I do not think, because I know I shall not know the one veritable transitory power. Because I cannot drink there where trees flower and springs flow, for there is nothing again. Because I know that time is always time, and place, and only place, and what is actually only for one time, and only for one place. I rejoice that things are as they are, and I renounce the blessed face, and renounce the voice, because I cannot hope to turn again. Consequently, I rejoice, having to construct something upon which to rejoice. And pray to God to have mercy upon us, and pray that I may forget these matters that with myself I too much discuss, too much explain. Because I do not hope to turn again, let these words answer, for what is done not to be done again, may the judgment not be heavy upon us. Because these wings are no longer wings to fly, but merely vans to beat the air which is now thoroughly small and dry, smaller and drier than the will. Teach us to care and not to teach us to sit still. Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Pray for us now at the hour of our death. Lady, 3 white leopards sat under a juniper tree, in the cool of the day, having fed to satiety. On my legs, my heart, my liver, and that which has been contained in the hollow round of my skull. And God said, Shall these bones live? Shall these bones live? And which has been contained in these bones? What is already was dry, said chirping, Because of the goodness of this lady, and because of her loveliness, and because she honors the Virgin in meditation, we shine brightness. And I, who am here dismembered, proffer my deeds to oblivion and my love, to the posterity of the desert and the fruit of the gourd. It is this which recovers my guts, the strings of my eyes, the indigestible portions, which leopards reject. The lady is withdrawn, in a white gown, to contemplation in a white gown. Let the whiteness of bones atone to forgetfulness. There is no life in them. As I am forgotten, and would be forgotten, so I would forget. Thus devoted, concentrated in purpose. And God said, Prophecy to the wind only for only. The wind will listen, and the bones sang chirping, with the burden of the grasshopper sang, Lady of silences, calm and distressed, torn and most whole, rose of memory, rose of forgetfulness, exhausted in life-giving, worried and reposeful, the single rose is now the garden, where all loves end, terminate torment, of all loves unsatisfied, the greater torment. Of love satisfied, end of the endless, journey to no end, conclusion of all that is inconcludable. Speech without word, and word of no speech. Grace to the mother, for the garden where all love ends. Under a juniper tree, the bones sang, scattered and shining. We are glad to be scattered. We did little good to each other, under a tree, in the cool of day, with a blessing of sand, forgetting themselves and each other united in the quiet of the desert. This is the land which ye shall divide by lot, and neither division nor unity matters. This is the land we have our inheritance. At the first turning of the second stair, I turned and saw below the same shape twisted on the banister under the vapor of the fetid air, struggling with the devil of the stairs who wears the deceitful face of hope and despair. At the second turning on the second stair, I left them twisting, turning below. There were no more faces, and the stair was dark, damp, jagged, like an old man's mouth, driveling beyond repair, or the toothed gullet of an aged shark. At the first turning of the third stair was a slotted window blind like the fig's fruit, and beyond hawthorn blossom of a pasture scene, the broad-backed figure dressed in blue and green enchanted the Maytime with an antique flute. Blown hair is sweet, brown hair over a mouth blown, lilac in brown hair. Distraction, music of the flute, stops and sets in the mid, over the third stair. Fading and fading, strength beyond hope and despair, climbing in the third stair. Lord, I am not worthy, Lord, I am not worthy, but speak the word only. Who walked between violet and the violet, who walked between the various ranks of varied green, going in white and blue, in merriest color, talking of trivial things, in ignorance and knowledge, of eternal dolor, who moved among the others as they walked, who then made strong the fountains, and made flesh the spirit, and made flesh the springs, made cool the dry rock, and made firm the sands, in blue larkspur, blue of merriest color, Saverna Voss. Here are the years that walk between bearing, and the fiddles and the flutes restoring, one who moves in the time between sleep, waking and wearing, white light folded, sheathing about her folded. The years walk restoring through a bright cold of tears, the years restoring where the verse of ancient rhyme redeem, the time redeem, the unread vision in the highest dream, while jeweled unicorns draw back in gilded hearse. The silent sister, veiled in white and blue, between the yews, behind the garden god, whose flute is breathless, bent her head and sighed but spoke no word. But the fountains sprang up and birds sang down, redeem the time, redeem the dream, the token, the word, unheard, unspoken, till the winds shake, the southlands whisper from the yew, and after this, our exile. Well, guys, I only got through 4 verses of that, and it looks like I might be being called away right now. But I hope you enjoyed at least the first 4 verses of Ash Wednesday by T.S. Eliot. And I wish you guys a wonderful rest of the evening and a very, very happy Lent. I will obviously be seeing you guys later on. And in the meantime, have a wonderful